What's the number one obstacle for peaceful coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians? Check out this clip with Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu talking on the Lex Fridman podcast about this exact question. So we'll watch this clip together and then talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. Love to stay in touch. Check this out.
What is the top obstacle to peaceful coexistence of Israelis and Palestinians? Let's talk about the big question of peace in this part of the world.
Well, I think the reason you have the persistence of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which goes back about a century, is the persistent Palestinian refusal to recognize a Jewish state, a nation state for the Jewish people in any boundary. That's why they opposed the establishment of the state of Israel before we had a state, and that's why they've opposed it after we had a state. They opposed it when we didn't have Judea and Samaria, the West Bank in our heads, and Gaza, and they oppose it after we have it. Doesn't make a difference. It's basically their persistent refusal to recognize a Jewish state in any boundaries. And I think their tragedy is that they've been commandeered for a century by leadership that refused to compromise with the idea of Zionism, namely that the Jews deserve a state in this part of the world. The territorial dispute is something else. You have a territorial dispute if you say, okay, you're living on this side, we're living on that side, let's decide where the border is, and so on. That's not what the argument is. The Palestinian society, which is itself fragmented, but all the factions agree there shouldn't be a Jewish state anywhere, okay? They just disagree between Hamas that says, oh, well, you should have it, we should get rid of it with terror, and the others who say, well, no, we should also use political means to dissolve it. So that is the problem.
So even as part of a two-state solution, they're still against the idea.
Well, they don't want a state next to Israel. They want a state instead of Israel. And they say, if we get a state, we'll use it as a springboard to destroy the smaller Israeli state, which is what happened when Israel unilaterally walked out of Gaza and effectively established a Hamas state there. They didn't say, oh, good, now we have our own territory, our own state. Israel is no longer there. Let's build peace. Let's build, economic projects. Let's enfranchise our people. No, they turned it into a terror bastion from which they fired 10,000 rockets into Israel. When Israel left Lebanon, because we had terrorist attacks from there, then we had Lebanon taken over by Hezbollah, a terrorist organization that seeks to destroy Israel. And therefore, every time we just walked out, what we got was not peace. We didn't give, territory for peace. We got territory for terror. That's what we had. And that's what would happen as long as the reigning ideology says we don't want Israel in any border. So the idea of two states assumes that you'd have on the other side a state that wants to live in peace and not one that will be overtaken by Iran and its proxies in 2 seconds and become a base to destroy Israel. And therefore, I think that most Israelis today, if you ask them, they'd say it's not going to work in that concept. So what do you do? What do you do with the Palestinians? Okay, they're still there, and unlike them, I don't want to throw them out. They're going to be living here, and we're going to be living here in an area which is, by the way, just to understand, the entire area of so-called West Bank and Israel is the width of the Washington Beltway, more or less, just a little more, not much more. You can't really divide it up. You can't say, well, you're going to fly in. Who controls the airspace? Well, it takes you about 2.5 minutes to cross it with a regular 747, okay? With a fighter plane, it takes you 1.5 minutes, okay? So you're not, how are you going to divide the airspace? Well, you're not going to divide it. Israel's going to control that airspace and the electromagnetic space and so on. So security has to be in the hands of Israel. My view of how you solve this problem is a simple principle. The Palestinians should have all the powers to govern themselves and none of the powers to threaten Israel, which basically means that the responsibility for overall security remains with Israel. And from a practical point of view, we've seen that every time that Israel leaves a territory, and takes its security forces out of an area, it immediately is overtaken by Hamas or Hezbollah or jihadists who basically are committed to the destruction of Israel and also bring misery to the Palestinians or Arab subjects. So I think that that principle is less than perfect sovereignty, because you're taking a certain amount of powers, sovereign powers, especially security, away. But I think it's the only practical solution. So people say, but it's not a perfect state. I said, okay, call it what you will. Call it, I don't know, limited sovereignty, call it autonomy plus, call it whatever you want to call it. But that's the reality. And right now, if you ask Israelis across the political spectrum, except the very hard left, most Israelis agree with that. They don't really debate it.
So a two-state solution where Israel controls the security of the entire region.
We don't call it quite that. I mean, there are different names, but the idea is, yes, Israel controls security in it's the entire area. It's this tiny area between the Jordan River and the sea. I mean, it's like, you can walk it in not one afternoon. If you're really fit, you can do it in a day. Less than a day. I did.
A two-state solution was never really a solution, never really an option, unfortunately, on the table in any of this. Israel's tried many times, made many offers, had many discussions, agreed to many things over the decades, and it was never received, it was never agreed upon, because the goal is not for lasting peace for everyone. That's not what it is. It's about the destruction of Israel. And even when you're not talking about outright genocidal maniacs like Hamas, the Palestinian Authority themselves, the more liberal of the two in the so-called West Bank in Judea and Samaria, they still are paying pay for slay. That if somebody from their area does different sorts of terrorist activities, that the family is compensated for the person dying in facilitating a terrorist act. And so you can't make peace with a government body that is endorsing those things. After October 7th, I think the delusion of the two-state solution was sort of really made abundantly clear to everybody that this is just not an option. And so what they're talking about now, it seems, what Prime Minister Netanyahu is mentioning, is that something where they have an ability to govern themselves with certain restrictions as far as not being able to attack Israel. So Israel would be sort of responsible for their defense and sort of in control of the airspace and whatnot, because we know, and at the end of the day, this is a question that's always asked, if Israel were to put down its weapons tomorrow, they would come in and destroy all of Israel. But if they were to put down their weapons tomorrow, there would be lasting peace. Because at the end of the day, Israel is in it for the peace. They want lasting peace in the region. They have no interest in having their citizens constantly bombarded by rockets and bus bombings and Sparrow Pizza Shop bombings. They don't want to continue living a life like this. Not a normal life for anyone to have to live. And God willing, through the process of this war and finishing off Hamas, that we can be in the next stage of discussions for a real and lasting long-term peace in the region. If you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.